This video is dedicated to what may have been the most important game in the career of the 11th world chess champion, Bobby Fischer. Not because it was the most beautiful, not because it was the most complex, but because this game changed everything. Game 3 of the World Chess Championship match between Boris Spassky and Bobby Fischer marked a turning point, not only in the match itself, but possibly in Fischer's entire life and career. Today, we won't dive into the long and chaotic negotiations surrounding the match. We won't focus on the Cold War politics, media pressure, or the off-the-board drama that surrounded the event. You're watching Masters of the Chessboard, and today we take a close look at Game 3 of the 1972 World Chess Championship. By the time the match began, Bobby Fischer was at the absolute peak of his powers. After a historic run through the candidates tournament, he entered the championship with the highest ELO rating ever recorded at that moment. And yet, despite this, Fischer was not considered the clear favorite. Before the match, the head-to-head score between Fischer and Spassky told a different story. Fischer had never beaten Spassky in a classical game. 3 losses, 2 draws, 0 wins. And once the match began, the situation only got worse. After the first 2 games, Boris Spassky was leading 2-0. According to multiple witnesses, Fischer was on the verge of a nervous breakdown. There were real fears that he might abandon the match altogether and return home. If Fischer was going to stay in the fight, if he was going to believe in himself again, Game 3 was absolutely critical. February 1972, Reykjavik, Iceland. Spassky has the white pieces. Fischer plays black. And this is where the story truly begins.
Boris Spassky opened the game with d4, and Robert Fischer replied with knight f6. Spassky continued with c4, and black answered e6. If white had played knight c3 here, the game would have entered the Nimzo-Indian defense. Spassky chose to avoid that, and instead played knight f3. Now, black had a choice, and Fischer went for c5, entering the Benoni defense, a system closely related in spirit to the King's Indian defense, which Fischer also frequently played with black. Spassky responded with d5. The pawns were exchanged, and black played d6. White developed the knight to c3. Black followed up with g6, planning to fianchetto the bishop. At this point, Spassky had to choose which system he wanted to play against Fischer, and he went for nd2. At first glance, this move looks very strange. White loses a tempo and blocks both the bishop and the queen. The idea behind this move was introduced almost 50 years earlier by the great Aaron Nimzowitsch, and it was later frequently used by Spassky's predecessor on the World Championship throne, Tigran Petrosian. The idea is simple. White plans to reroute the knight to c4, putting pressure on the d6 pawn. It also opens up the possibility of advancing the f-pawn, which can be useful in certain positions, and we will actually see this later in the game. For now, black played knight nd7. Spassky struck in the center with e4. White does not rush to bring the knight to c4 immediately. First, development must be completed and the king secured. Black fianchettos the bishop to g7, and white plays be2. Why does the bishop go to e2? On d3 or c4, it would be restricted by white's own pawns. On b5, it would come under attack from black's pawns. On e2, surprisingly, it finds the safest and at the same time the most active square available. Castling by black, castling by white. Rook e8. Queen c2, placing pressure along the diagonal. And now Fischer shocked the entire chess world with knight h5. A very bold and highly unconventional move. At first glance, black places a knight on the edge of the board, seemingly inviting white to exchange it and damage black's kingside pawn structure. Let's be honest, for most players, the hand would never go up to play such a move. But Fischer, of course, was not an ordinary chess player or even an ordinary grandmaster. By the way, let me know in the comments if you'd like to see a separate documentary episode about Robert Fischer's life, or if you feel that YouTube already has enough of those. So how could white respond to this unusual move? Imagine that white does not exchange the knight on h5 and instead plays something like knight c4. Black would then offer a knight exchange on e5. Because white has a space advantage, trading minor pieces is not desirable, but in this case, white would be forced into it, and after that, the exchange on h5 could still occur anyway. If white stubbornly refused to exchange the knight and instead developed, for example, be3, black would play knight g4, and the knight would feel very comfortable on that square. Gradually, minor pieces would be exchanged, the defensive structure around white's king would weaken, and the position would become roughly equal. As the 12th world champion Anatoly Karpov once said, "If you are playing black and the position is equal, then black is better. It means black has successfully solved the opening." In this position, Spassky chose the most principled approach. He immediately exchanged the knight on h5 and only then finally brought his knight to c4. Fischer responded with knight e5, defending the d-pawn and once again offering a knight trade. Remember, with this pawn structure and a space advantage, white does not want to exchange minor pieces, so Spassky retreated the knight to e3. This is the critical moment of the game. The next few moves could have completely changed chess history. What was Fischer planning? A logical continuation would have been knight g4, continuing to insist on the exchange. White would have been forced to shuffle the knight back and forth, likely leading toward a draw, or to agree to the exchange with f3, after which black would still have no real problems, plus ideas of attacking along the g-file. But Fischer felt that knight g4 was not sharp enough. Instead, he immediately threw his queen into the attack with queen h4. This was an imprecise and premature move, possibly made under psychological pressure. White could have punished it and obtained an advantage.
However, Spassky underestimated black's idea and responded too passively with bishop d2. There is some logic here, connecting the rooks, perhaps preparing queenside play with b4, but a much stronger move was f3, cutting off the knight's route to g4. Since black played ng4 anyway, white was now forced to exchange knights, giving up the knight on e3, which had occupied an excellent square. White then played bishop f4, losing another tempo, since just 2 moves earlier the bishop had gone to d2. Black calmly played queen f6, and here white commits the third inaccuracy. There is a saying among grandmasters, to lose a game, it's enough to make either 1 serious blunder or 3 inaccuracies. In this game, Spassky first played queen c2 inaccurately, then bishop d2, and now he makes a third imprecise move with g3. It looks like a solid move, reinforcing the bishop, but in reality, it hopelessly weakens the king. It would have been much safer to retreat the bishop to g3, where it would have stood excellently and kept the king safe. Fischer calmly played d2. You can feel that he now senses comfort in the position. Black has 2 bishops against white's bishop and knight. From here on, black simply completes development and prepares a pawn advance on the queen side. All long-term advantages are now on black's side. There's no rush, no fear, and all of this stems from the well-executed exchange on g4. Black pushes b5. White retreats the rook to e1, defending the e-pawn and eyeing a possible break with e5, but black immediately shuts this down with queen g6. White plays b3, reinforcing the a4 pawn. Black begins doubling rooks to increase pressure on the e4 pawn. Queen d3, rb8. Fischer does not rush to play rook e8. First, he hints at the idea that after a takes b5, the rook could penetrate to b3. Spassky reacts by playing a takes b5 and then b4. Of course, black has no reason to capture this pawn. The knight would retreat to a2, regain the pawn, and possibly hop to c6 later. Instead, black plays c4, forcing white to retreat the queen to d2. Now comes rook e8, and black is firmly targeting the e4 pawn. Black could already play bishop takes c3, followed by capturing e4, but notice how Fischer converts his advantage with absolute precision. Before permanently removing the bishop from g7, the key defender of the king, black first maximizes the stability of the position. He pushes h5, moves the king to h7, then realizes that the previous square was better and returns it. White has no useful moves and simply repeats rook moves. Only now, after calculating everything, Fischer finally plays bishop takes c3. A series of exchanges follows, and at first glance, it may seem that white is holding on. Yes, white is down a pawn, but opposite-colored bishops offer some drawing chances. However, the presence of queens dramatically changes the evaluation due to mating threats. Spassky tries to play actively and brings the bishop to h6, threatening mate on g7. Black parries the threat with tempo, simultaneously attacking the bishop. White is forced to retreat the bishop to c1, planning to reroute it to b2 and renew the mating threat. Fischer first pins the bishop with bishop b1, and after king f1, launches the bishop deep into white's camp. Some commentators suggested that white could try to exchange queens with queen b2. What would happen then? Fischer would centralize his queen with queen e4. If white continued to threaten mate on g7, black would respond with check and c3. After queen c1, black would again play queen e4 check. Then queen e5, defending against queen g5 and the mating threat. After queen g5, black would finally agree to exchange queens, but only after playing king h7 with tempo. After the queen exchange, both kings would march forward. But black's king would be far more active. Black would not only keep the extra pawn, but also threaten to capture the d-pawn or push the f-pawn. This would create an extremely unpleasant position for white, a passed c-pawn for black, a weak b-pawn for white, and a reserve passer on the f-file. White simply cannot defend against everything, and the game would be lost. Having calculated these lines, Spassky chose king f1. Fischer activated his bishop, and after king e2, it was only a matter of finding the precise sequence of checks. Queen e4 check. Then queen c2 check. After white blocks with queen d2, black naturally does not exchange queens. Instead, he ties the queen to the defense of the b4 pawn. At this moment, Spassky makes the decisive mistake with queen d4. Black responds with bishop d3 check, and here Spassky resigned. Why? The white king has no safe square. If king e1, black captures the pawn on d4 with check, and the queen penetrates along the light squares. If king e3, then queen d1 wins immediately, threatening the bishop, and after it moves, a mating attack follows. Thus, Robert Fischer defeated Boris Spassky for the first time in his life. He gained confidence, completely turned the course of the match in his favor, and soon after became the 11th world chess champion.
If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.